Minister of Children and Youth Services, the Minister of Community and Social Services, and the Minister responsible for anti-racism.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I rise today in the Legislature because February is Black History Month. It's a time when we recognize and celebrate the contributions of Black Ontarians, Black Canadians here across the province and across our country. Mr. Speaker, I want to talk a little bit about music, Canadian music, and you know, if we look back in the past, we have people like Robert Nathaniel Dead, Portia White, Oscar Peterson, Canadians from the African diaspora have contributed so much to music. But as a minister in this government, and as a lifelong hip-hop fan, I'm going to talk about a piece of Canadian history that usually doesn't get spoken in a house like this. The story's a story of my youth and what influenced me and what helped define who I am today. It's a story about the evolution of a city. It's a story about a culture that it was emerging here in the city, and of course the sound. You know, and I often feel proud to be part of and to be able to witness Black history in the making and musical history right here in our very own city. I didn't know it then, but I was part of a transformation that was taking place here in the city of Toronto. It was about a transformation, a rebirth of our city. My story is part of a much larger story, one that's placed Ontario on the urban music map. My story starts about 30 years ago. It was the late 80s, and I can remember on Saturday mornings getting up and first watch a little bit of cartoons, then I would watch my Kung Fu movies, then the most important part of the day came. It was 1 o'clock, and on CKLN 88.1, which was a Ryerson College station, I'd get my cassette player ready and my finger on pause, and I'd start to record The Fantastic Voyage. And a little bit later in my years, in the 90s, I remember running home at 4:30. In fact, it sounds kind of strange, but my watch would be set for 4:30 for an alarm. I'd run home to watch Rap City, which was hosted at the beginning by Michael Williams and then Master T. The Fantastic Voyage was a community radio station run by DJ Ron Nelson. And I believe Ron is here today. He said he was going to be here. I hope he's here. But he spun a variety of music genres, and the show was credited for influencing the growth of Toronto's hip-hop scene, introducing Canadians, Torontonians to American artists, and giving local artists like Melody MC, a.k.a. Wes Williams, a.k.a. Maestro Fresh West, who evolved into Canada's first commercially successful rapper. And for me, and for many others too, The Fantastic Voyage was the only way we could hear that amazing sound that was emerging all around the world called rap music. Getting hold of records back then was difficult, and getting any radio play was even more difficult. But DJ Ron Nelson helped change that. He set up the Jam Line, a 24-hour recording line that provided listeners with information about dances, events, and concerts. He connected us to the sound, he plugged us into the scene. He traveled to America to secure acts, and then largely thanks to him, I can remember how that music changed my neighborhood and how it made me feel. It made me feel proud because I was part of something. You know, I can remember listening to artists like Boogie Down Production, NWA, KRS-One, you know, Public Enemy. It made me feel like I was part of something special that advocated for justice, for self-awareness, for reliance, and really for survival. It was the most powerful sound in my generation, and often it was discounted by many as a gimmick or a fad. In fact, rap music automatically gained some powerful adversaries. It was a time when mainstream radio, television, the entertainment industry snubbed the sound. Internationally, politicians looked at ways to dismantle it. Criticism came from all different directions. And despite being the unwanted child of the music industry, artists were selling millions of copies without any mainstream radio play, and even more importantly, they were capturing the hearts and minds of millions internationally, and Canada was no stranger to the sound. Mr. Speaker, I can remember being in London, England, when I was a young man, and turning on the radio station and seeing the Dream Warriors perform in England. And I remember that band because they're from the Jane and Finch, I believe, Willowdale community, and they hit the top 20 in England. And I'll tell you, being from Toronto, being a young black man from Canada, being in London at the time, and knowing that the Dream Warriors were representing my city, it made me feel special.
Here, here.
You know, their first two singles sold close to, I think, roughly about 1 million copies.
Wow.
And I was so proud to be in England and to feel a bit at home. I can remember how it made me feel to listen to Canadian hip-hop and urban music pioneers like Maestro Fresh, West Main Source, Michie Me, who's joining us here today, and so many others, and how it made me feel. And Mr. Speaker, Canadian hip-hop culture kept moving forward, evolving, and many stepped up to carry the banner. You know, artists like Cardinal Official, who's joining us here today, was the first rapper in history, Canadian history, to top the Billboard Hot 100 in America. You know, we had artists like Chaos, we had the Rascals. You know, from my very own neighborhood, I have JB, Adrian Homer, who's joining me here today. You know, these were folks who picked up the banner and moved forward. And it was because of their success that we saw other things develop. We saw Flow 93.5 become a reality here in the city of Toronto because of the momentum they were building. And here we are 30 years later. You know, 30 years later, and rap music is still dominating all the charts internationally with no sign of slowing down. Earlier this year, Nielsen Music reported that for the first time in U.S. history, hip-hop is the most commercially dominant genre in the music industry. Not bad for a sound that was made up by a bunch of poor black kids with some old records, a couple of record players, and some microphones. Mr. Speaker, 2 years ago, when I was in LA, I was meeting with film, television, and music executives, and 7 of the top 10 Billboard artists were Canadian. And their sound was urban, and they were all from Ontario, including Drake, and that year, who was the most streamed artist in the world. I was proud to be connected to a city that was dominating the American and international music charts, and Toronto now benefits from that reputation as an emerging powerhouse of a city. Toronto is a world-class city like New York, London, Tokyo, and one of the reasons because of this success is because of our thriving culture sector, with our urban sound leading the way. Rap industry pioneers in the 80s like Ron Nelson, Master T, and a host of others never received the respect they deserved for their talent from outside their peer groups. And we should celebrate their contribution to making this city what it is today. As we celebrate our latest cultural success through artists like The Weeknd, Drake, Jazz Cartier, Jesse Reyes, and Daniel Caesar, respect is due for those who laid the foundation and broke the ground here in Toronto, and those that transferred us into this new era of music. Toronto is a city that it is because of them. Those who paved the way for artists from all across our province to raise their voice, not only to be heard, but respected and revered from communities across Ontario. You can go anywhere across this province, you can go anywhere across this country, in the smallest town, and there'll be a kid who's making music and rapping, and it's because of our pioneers here today. So I just want to take this opportunity to say thank you to everyone who's joined us here today in the gallery and the East Members Gallery. Thank you for everything you've done to make Ontario a better place and to make Canada a better place for all of us by working so hard 30 years ago plus to bring us to where we are today, to making Ontario the best place in the world to live. Thank you very much on behalf of the Government of Ontario.